Question number 1. Complete the table of values for y equals 2x plus 2. So they've started off by putting some of the values in for us and we need to finish it off. So we need to substitute in -1 into where our x value is, because they've told us that is the first x coordinate that we are missing. So when we substitute that in, we would get -2 add 2, which gets us 0. We then substitute in 0 and we would get 0 add 2, which gets us 2. We then substitute in 1 and we'd get 2 plus 2, which is 4. They've done this one for us. The next one, 3 multiplied by 2 gets us 6, and then add the 2 would get us 8, and finally when we substitute in 4 we would get 10. The second part of this question asks us to draw the graph from above. Okay, this is still part of the same question, so we are going to use the table of values we've got. So the first coordinate I've got is -2, -2. So I'm going to go along my x coordinate and then I'm going to go down. Now be careful on the scale here. This is worth 2 and it's only 1 square. That'll get a lot of people. -2 along, -2 down. The next one, -1 along, 0. Next one, 0 and 2. Then we've got 1 and 4, 2 and 6, 3 and 8, 4 and 10. Now generally speaking, if you can see a line starting to form, if you continue to join it up, chances are it's the right line. Then when you've got your points, please make sure you join them with a ruler. If you do not join it up, you could lose easy marks. Okay, the marks for this are as follows. If you get the whole table of values, you would get those 2 marks. If you only get 2 parts of that correct, but on all the rest wrong, you'd still get 1 of those marks, okay? On the graph, if you plot all of your points correctly, you would get your 2 marks for the graph. Make sure that you have joined them up. If you have used the numbers from above and they were incorrect, you can still get the follow-through mark for joining them up correctly. Or if you've got some of these points correct, you need at least 2 of the points correct to be able to get the first mark on the graph. Question number 2. Grant is driving a lorry to deliver some equipment from a factory to a hospital. The distance from the factory to the hospital is 200 miles. The lorry uses 1 litre of fuel to go 5 miles. So 1 litre is 5 miles. A litre of fuel for the lorry costs £1.50. Work out the total cost of fuel that the lorry has used. So the first thing we need to work out is how many litres do we need to go that distance. So I need to do 200, that's the distance in miles that he has travelled, divided by 5, because it's 5 miles is 1 litre, and that would get me an answer of 40. So he's used 40 litres. I then need to take my answer of 40, and I need to multiply that by the cost of the fuel, which is £1.50 for a litre. Once I've worked that out, that would give me £60, and that is how much this would cost. So the marks for question 2, you would get 1 mark for being able to identify that you needed to do 200 divided by the 5. Whether you've done that in your head and not shown the working, risky, but you would still get it if the 40 was clearly shown. My advice would be to show all of your working. Now if you take whatever number you get here, even if it is incorrect, and you bring it down and you multiply it by £1.50, that shows that you understood that whatever you'd got here, you needed to multiply by £1.50 to work out the actual amount that it was going to cost. So that is your second mark, and your final mark is for having the answer correct of £60. Question 3 is a fractions question. We need to add these 2 fractions, 3/8 plus 1/3. To do this, we need to make sure that we have a common denominator. To find a common denominator, we need to think of a number that both 8 and 3 go into. The easiest way to do this is 8 times 3, which is 24. So I can change both of these fractions to equivalent fractions with 24 on the bottom. How did I go from 8 to 24? Well, I have multiplied it by 3, so I need to do the same to the top. Therefore, I would get 9. How have I gone from 3 to 24? I've multiplied by 8, so therefore I need to do the same on the top, and I would get 8. Now I can add these because they have a common denominator, they are the same size, so 9 plus 8 would get me 17 over 24. The marks for this question, you would get 1 mark for clearly showing that you understand you need to have a common denominator and working out those fractions, and then an answer mark for actually being able to add them correctly. Question number 4. Here is a diagram of part of a wall in Sarah's house. We've got 3 metres by 2 metres. It then says Sarah's going to cover this part of the wall with square tiles. Maybe it's her kitchen, maybe it's her bathroom, who knows. The square tiles have sides of 20 centimetres. Now the first thing that's jumping out at me here is that these are in centimetres. These are, however, in metres. Don't be fooled by this. We need to change these to make sure that they are in the same units. So 2 metres is the same as 200. The marks for this one, you get 1 mark for either of these calculations. So I'm just going to put it in the middle. Whether you did this one first or this one first doesn't make any difference. You only get 1 mark for having one of those. You then get a mark for taking these 2 numbers and knowing that you needed to multiply them together. And then you get a final answer mark of how many tiles Sarah was going to need for her bathroom or kitchen. Question 5a. asks us to simplify 4x plus 3y minus x minus 4y. So first of all, I'm looking at the x's. I've got 4x minus x, which would get me 3x, and then I'm looking at the y's. I've got a plus 3y, take away 4y. That's going to get me minus y. The marks for this question are quite simple. It's worth 2 marks. You get 1 mark for getting the x's or the y's correct, and a second mark for being able to get the other one correct. 1 mark for each. Part B on this question asks you to simplify once again. We've got a number term of 2, and it is the only number term, so we know we're still going to have a 2 afterwards. And then we have a positive 4x and a minus 7x. If I have positive 4 and I take away 7, I'm left with negative 3x. That's worth 1 mark for completing all of that. 5c, you need to know the rule that when we are multiplying, we add the powers. So t to the power of 4 times t to the power of 7 becomes t to the power of 11. On question D, we're dividing. When we divide, we quite simply subtract the powers. So that would become y to the power of 4. On part E, we have a power on power rule. This means that we need to multiply the powers. So it would become c to the power of 12. Each one of those is worth 1 mark for the answer. So there's an answer mark here, an answer mark here, and an answer mark here. Question number 6. Bill gives away £20,000 to help animals. Bill's obviously very generous and loves animals. He's giving 20% of this money to a donkey sanctuary. That's the first part of this question. It then says he shares the rest of the 20,000, so whatever's left over after he's given his money to the donkey sanctuary, between a dog's home and a cat's home in the ratio of 3 to 2. How much does he give to the cat's home? Okay, so the first thing with this ratio is that I need to remember that it is the dog's home to the cat's home. And remember, with a ratio, the first thing is always the first number that you see. So we're going to save that for later on. And so the first part is he's giving 20% away to the donkey sanctuary. So we need to find 20% of this total amount. So you may wish to find 10%, as this is a non-calculated paper, which would be £2,000. And therefore, if we know that 10% is £2,000, we should be able to work out that twice that would be £4,000. So that is how much is going to the donkeys in the donkey sanctuary. The next thing that we need to do is take this off the original amount so that we've worked out how much he's got left, because it says he shares the rest of the money. So we need to do £20,000, take away our £4,000, which leaves us with £16,000. Now he's going to share this in the ratio of 3 to 2. At the end, we're only interested in the cat's home, but it's worth working out both of them just to show our working in full. So with a ratio, there are 3 parts here and 2 parts here. So the first thing that we need to do is add these together. So 3 add 2 equals 5, and that is how many parts are in total for this ratio. Once we know there are 5 parts, we need to know the value of 1 part before we can begin working out how much goes to the dogs, how much goes to the cats. So we need to do the amount of money he's going to share, which is 16,000, and we need to divide that by 5. Now, I'd like to think that we'd be able to work this out. If not, maybe cover over some of the zeros and put them back on once you've been able to work this out. It would get you £3,200. That is the value of 1 part, remember. Do not think that is the end of it. This is just 1 part of that ratio. Now, as we said earlier, the dogs and cats, the ratio was 3 to 2. Okay, so we need to times both of these by 3,200. So the dogs would get £9,600 and the cats would get £6,400. I can check that I'm correct by adding these two together and check it gets me back to my 16,000, which it does. So chances are I've managed to do this correctly. Once I've got to this point, I need to make sure that I check what the question asks for. How much money does Bill give to the cat's home? The cats are on this side, therefore the cat's home is the £6,400. Make sure that you clearly state that that one is the cat's home by putting your answer on the answer line. So the marks for question 6, you would get 1 mark for correctly identifying how to find 20% of £20,000. Yeah. The second mark would be for working out that we needed to divide what was left over by 5, and that is for using your understanding of a ratio. And you would get another mark for working that out correctly. The final mark is for your answer of 6,400, and that is your 4 marks for that question. Question 7a, we've got a sequence here, it's going up. So the first thing we need to work out is what is it going up in each time. It's going up in 4s each time, so to write down an expression for the nth term, it will start with 4n. That's the difference between each one, the common difference. Then we need to work out how to go from 4 to the first term, and that is we need to take away 2. The second part of this tells us that a different sequence has the nth term of 20 minus 5n. Now first of all, before I do anything, I'm going to write out that 20 minus 5n actually means minus 5 times n. Remember that 5n means 5 lots of n. Now they're asking me for the 10th term. That means I need to substitute 10 as my value of n. So I would get 20 minus 5 times 10, because this time n is 10. Now we need to work this out. We always do the multiplication before the subtraction using BIDMAS. So therefore I would have 20 minus 50, which gets me negative 30. So the marks for this question, for the first part, it's worth 2 marks. You get 1 mark for having the correct number in front of the variable, the correct coefficient, and the second mark is for having the correct answer in total. Down here, you would also get 2 marks. The first mark is for showing that you know you need to substitute in the value of 10 as your n. The second mark is an answer mark for getting negative 30. Question number 8 tells me that I've got a regular pentagon, and inside that I've also got an equilateral triangle. Now first of all, pentagon, I know that has 5 sides. They've given me a diagram of it, which is very helpful of them. But in case you didn't know, pentagon has 5 sides. An equilateral triangle means that all of the sides must be the same, which means that also all of the angles would be the same. And if they add up to 180, then they must all be 60 degrees. So that's the first thing I'm going to label on there just to help me out. So I'm trying to find the angle x. Now to do that, I'm going to need to find the interior angle and then take off this 60 to work out what's left over for x. Now there are a few different ways of doing this. The first thing I would do is I would find the exterior angle. Now the exterior angle is always 360 degrees divided by however many angles there are, or however many sides there are, which in this case is 5. That would get me 72 degrees. So I know that one there is 72 degrees. Now if I know this is a straight line, angles on a straight line add up to 180, the exterior and the interior angle always add up to 180. So if I do 180, take away my 72, I'm going to be left with 108 degrees. That is the interior angle of this pentagon, okay? Now if I've got that whole angle there, I need to then take off the 60 to work out what is left for my x. So if I've got 108 and I take away 60, I'm going to be left with 48 degrees as my angle x. So x equals 48 degrees. Okay, so the marks for this one. First of all, you get 1 mark for showing that you were finding the exterior angle. Second of all, you get another mark for showing you needed to take off that from 180 to work out the interior angle. The third method mark is for actually showing that you're going to do this calculation, and then the answer mark is for having the answer of 48 degrees. Question 9 asks me to factorise. Now factorise is the opposite of expanding, so we need to put it back into a bracket by taking out a common factor. If I've got 3 and 12, they are both in the 3 times table, so 3 can go on the outside of my bracket. I do not have a common variable, a common letter in either of these, so 3 times something would have got me 3t, that must have been a t, and 3 times something would have got me a positive 12, that must have been a positive 4. This question, question B, asks me to expand and simplify. Now the first thing I'm going to do is expand this bracket and then expand this bracket. I'm going to treat them as 2 separate parts of this question. So over here, 7 times 2x would get me 14x, 7 times 1 would get me 7. Then I'm onto this set of brackets and I've got 6 times x, which is a positive 6x, and 6 times 3, which is a positive 18. The second part of this question is that I need to simplify. Therefore, I'm going to collect the like terms. I've got 14x and I add 6x, so I've got 20x altogether. I've also got plus 7 and a plus 18. That's going to get me a grand total of 25. Now, the second part of this question asks us, when x is a whole number, show that this is always a multiple of 5. Now, you may notice that this is exactly the same as we've just worked out. So I'm going to bring my answer from the first part down of 20x plus 25. Now to show that something is a multiple of 5, all I need to do is take a factor of 5 out by factorising. So 5 times something would get me 20x, that would be 4x, and 5 times something would get me a positive 25, so that would be 5. This shows that it is a multiple of 5 because I've taken the 5 out. So the marks for question 9, you would get 1 answer mark for factorising the first part correctly. The second one, you would get 1 mark for any part of this, whether you've got that half or that half correct, you would get 1 mark, and the second mark is for being able to get the final answer of this part. The third mark is for part BII, and that is demonstrating that you understand how to prove something is a multiple of 5. So that would be your final mark for that page. Question number 10. They have given you a diagram of a solid prism, and they have asked you to draw an accurate side elevation of this prism from the direction of the arrow, so it's looking at it this way. Now the first thing to notice is that the bottom of this is 6 centimetres long. So on this grid down below, I'm going to draw a line that is 6 centimetres, and I'm going to start on the bottom Obviously, if you've got these printed off smaller, just count the squares rather than actually looking at the measurements. But I'm going to go 6 centimetres along, and I'm going to label that as 6 centimetres. The next thing I'm going to look at is going up the sides. So on this side, on the diagram, it goes up 4 centimetres. So I know I need to go up 1, 2, 3, 4 centimetres to this point. Once again, I'm going to label that 4 centimetres. On the other side, it's going up 2 centimetres. So I'm going to go up 2 and label that one as well. The reason I know it's going up 2, if you couldn't see that, this one here must be the same as this one because we have a rectangle on the edge. The last thing that I need to know is how far along we go before we've got the slope. So that again is 2 centimetres, so I'm going to have to go to this point here, and then I'm going to need to join these up. Once I've joined these up, I have the full side elevation from the direction they have asked me to do it from. Now this question is worth 2 marks. If you get this complete diagram correct, you would get both of those marks. For one of the marks, if you got 3 parts of this correct, but perhaps you extended this line 1 square too many and then joined up your slope, you'd only get 1 of the marks. So 2 marks for getting the full diagram correct. Question number 11. This diagram represents a shed and they want us to find the volume of this shed. So the first thing that we need to do is find the area of the cross section and then multiply it by the depth of the shed. Now this cross section isn't a basic shape for us to work out, but we can split it into 2 shapes. Shape number 1, a nice easy rectangle for us, and shape number 2, a trapezium. At this point, if you don't know how to find the area of a trapezium, remember it is in your formula sheet at the beginning of your test. So area of a trapezium equals half A plus B, and then times that by the height. So the height is the distance between the parallel lines, A and B are the parallel lines. Okay, you need to know how to use this formula to be able to find the area of a trapezium. So first of all, let's start off with a nice easy shape. We're going to find the area of shape 1, which is a rectangle. So we're quite simply going to do 8 times 10. 8 times 10 gets me 80 metres squared. The second shape, the trapezium, we're going to need to substitute in using our formula that I've just written down and make sure that we've got the right values. So A and B. A can be this one along the bottom, which is going to be 10 metres, and B is this one along the top, which is 4 metres. I'm just going to label that one on there so we don't get confused. The height in between them is shown on the side, which is 6 metres. So I'm going to substitute this in. So I've got half, and then my A, which is 10, plus 4, which is my B, and I'm timesing this by 6. So if I work this out step by step, work out what's in the brackets first, I've got 14, and I'm going to times by 6 afterwards. Well, half of 14, that's 7. 7 times 6 gets me 42 metres squared. So I've got both of the separate areas of this cross-section. Now to find the total area of the cross-section, all I need to do is add these together. So the total area of the cross-section is just the area of shape 1, add the area of shape 2. So I've got 80, and I'm going to add to it the 42. That would get me 122 metres squared. Now, but they don't want just to find the area of the front, they want the volume. So we need to times it by how far back it goes, which is 30 metres. So to find the volume of the whole prism, I'm going to do 122 times by 30. So you may be able to do this in your head. You may think, oh, I'll times it by 3 and then I'll add on the 0, or lots of different ways, including the lattice method. You would get an answer of 3,660, and that is metres cubed. They have given you that on the answer line, so they wouldn't give you a mark for it, but it's always worth putting your units on. Now, the marks for this, you get 1 mark for finding the area of either of these shapes. My advice would be to always go for the easier of the two, go for the rectangle. You then get another mark if you've managed to find the total cross-section area, which is the case of both of those and adding them together. You then get another method mark for showing you understand that the volume means you need to times it by the third dimension that we have there, and you get an answer mark for your final answer being correct. Question number 12. So this question has a range of numbers. Some of them are in standard form, some of them might look like they're in standard form, but remember that standard form, the number needs to be below 10, so this would not be in standard form. We can either convert them all to standard form, or we can convert them all to ordinary numbers. For those of you that are less confident with standard form, you'll probably convert to ordinary numbers. So if I have this one here, and I need to convert this to an ordinary number, that means getting rid of this times 10 to the power of 5. I would need to write it out, and I would count the amount of jumps that the numbers would make to be able to make sure that that is the same as my power. So I would end up with 420,000 as my number, because remember it's gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The numbers have shifted 5 times, and it's getting larger because it's a positive number. This one here then, I would end up with my 1 and 3 from 13, and then I need to move 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, so I would end up with 130,000 for this one. This one, however, has a negative indice. That means it's going to end up with a 0.00 some amount of zeros. So to work that out, we do exactly the same. We know it's going to have a 3, and you can count from where we've got our numbers, and you can work it out. Or the sneaky way is to see that there is 6 here, so therefore it's going to have moved 6 spaces. So remember, there's this part as well from the 30, and you would end up with 0.00003. This one here, notice it's a negative, first of all. If we're going to have to put these in order, this one is a negative. That kind of gives us a clue as to where it's going to come if all of the others are positive. Oops. So this one will be 0.00025. And finally, this one here, if we moved the numbers 6 times, we'd end up with 5,200. So to put these in order, the first thing I would do is I would number them. So the smallest number is going to be the only one that is a negative. Then we're going to look at this number here. Then we're looking at this one, 5,200 would be number 3, number 4, and number 5. Now, just to show the examiner that we definitely know what we're doing, it's always worth writing these out. So we would write out the original numbers that we've got, because that's what we've been asked to do. So the first one would be minus 2.5 times 10 to the negative 4. Second one, looking along, we've got this one here, so that is 30 times 10 to the power of 6. Third one over here, 0.0052 times 10 to the power of 6. Fourth one, this one here, 13 times 10 to the power of 4. And finally, 4.2 times 10 to the power of 5. So 3 marks for this one. You get 1 mark for showing that you would be trying to convert any of the numbers to either into standard form or to an ordinary number. So we've done them as ordinary numbers. You may have done them as standard form. You can do either. The second mark is for getting 2 of them correct. So whether you've done them as ordinary numbers or as standard form, you would get your mark 2 for getting 2 of them correct. And the final one is for having them in order, which is an answer mark. Question number 13, we've got the corners A, B and C are all corners on a cuboid. Now this is a 3-dimensional plane, so we need to be really careful when we're looking at the coordinates. Now because it tells me to write down the coordinates of C, that indicates that actually the answer is somewhere on this page, and I just need to remember how to work out which numbers they're talking about. They're not asking me to calculate or find at this stage, they're just asking me to write down. So the coordinates of C. Now C has something in common with B and something in common with A, so that's probably going to help me. So the first thing I'm looking for is the X, because when you have 3 coordinates it is always X, Y and Z, or Z, same thing. So on the X axis I've gone the same distance along as B, so therefore I would need to put an 8 in the X axis. The next thing is the Y, which is the one that's going up here, as you can see, so when used to an X and a Y, and that has gone up to the same height as A, so I'm looking at the middle value, and that would be a 4. The final one is the Z axis, or Z, as I said, which is the one that comes out forwards. Now C has not come out forwards at all, so therefore it would be 0. Now, the next part asks us to use this to find a midpoint on a line. So the line AB comes from here and goes all the way down to there. Now if I want to find the midpoint of this line somewhere on here, I can use the 2 coordinates of A and B to find the halfway point. Remember, whenever we're trying to find the midpoint, if we add the 2 numbers together and we divide it by 2, that will give us the midpoint. So I'm going to start off with my X. Well, the X for A was 8 and the X for B was also 8. So 8 add 8 divided by 2. Well, 8 add 8 is 16, divided by 2 gets me 8. So that's my first part of my coordinate done. Then I'm going to look at Y. The Y coordinate of A was 4, the Y coordinate of B was 0. 4 plus 0 divided by 2, because remember I'm trying to find halfway in between, and if I'm not sure how to do that, I always add them, so I would get Y equals 2. So I can put that in there as well. The last one is my Z coordinate, and I've got 7 on the first one on A, and I'm going to have to add that to my 0 on B and divide it by 2. 7 plus 0 is 7, and if I divide it by 2, I've either got 3.5 or 7 over 2 would be fine. So I'm going to put in my final coordinate there. So the marks on this one, this is just an answer mark for being able to get all of those correct. On the second one, it's worth 2 marks. You'd get 1 mark for getting 2 of them correct, and the second mark would be for getting all of them correct. So question 14, this is a nice circle theorems question for us. They've told us a lot of information down here, but they've also given us most of this on diagram. So A, B and C are 3 points on a circle. Yeah, we can see that, thank you. DBE is a tangent to the circle, DBE. Tangent, first thing I'm thinking, 90 degrees. Okay, make sure that that is something that jumps to mind. AB is parallel to CD. Well, these nice little arrows here, lovely notation, that's already shown me that, but thanks. BC is a diameter, so they're telling me that goes through the centre. Good to know. That helps me when I'm coming to look at the tangent. And angle ABC is 27, ABC. Well, they've already shown me that on there. They're asking me to find the size of angle CDB, which is this one up here. This is the one we are trying to find. Now, it's very important to notice that on this question, it has an asterisk by the number. That means that this is one of the questions where our quality of written communication is going to get us some marks. We need to explain in full what we are doing at every step. So the first thing was the tangent, that jumped to mind. So I know that this is 90 degrees and that this is 90 degrees. So I'm going to state which angles they are. This one, CBD, and that is equal to CBE. And both of those are equal to 90 degrees. And I'm going to put my reason in there as well. My reason is that a tangent is perpendicular. Perpendicular means that it meets at 90 degrees to the radius or the diameter of a circle. Okay, so I've got my first reason in there. Apologise for my handwriting. Got my first reason in there, and I've already worked something out. I know this is 90 degrees. Now I can see quite clearly this is a triangle. There are often triangles hidden in circle theorem questions. This is a triangle. If I can work out that one, then I can easily work out this one by taking it away from 180. So the next thing that I'm going to look at is, can I find this angle here? Now, these are parallel. That tells me that I might be able to use one of the angles in parallel lines rules that I know. So I can see that there is a Z shape here, which are called alternate angles. And therefore I'm going to use that as my second rule, and I can state that this one here is 27 degrees. So therefore I'm going to say BCD equals 27 degrees. And that's because it is the same as this one. They're tucked inside each part of that Z shape. And that is because alternate angles are equal. Okay, that's the Z shape. Make sure that you've got that in your memory. If we've got some parallel lines, these two angles inside are always equal. So I've got these two angles and I need to find this one. Well, angles in a triangle add up to 180. So here comes my third rule that I'm going to use. Angles in a triangle sum to 180 degrees. So if I know that I've got 180 and I need to take off both of those two. So I've got 90 and I've got 27. So I could add those two together first rather than do two lots of subtractions. So then I'm actually going to have 180 take away 117 degrees. Just move that up a little bit, which is going to get me 63 degrees. So angle CDB is equal to 63 degrees. Now, there are a couple of different ways you could have approached this, but from the way I have done it, you would get 1 mark for showing an understanding and using a rule. You would then get another mark for showing an understanding and finding another angle that would help you. So BCD was my second angle that I found. And you would get 2 communication marks. So 2 marks for showing your working and 2 marks for your communication. So I've used 3 rules here. It's okay to only use 2, but you needed to make sure that you have got your working clearly shown out and you have clearly stated which rules you have used. Question 15. The straight line L has an equation of y equals 3x minus 4. Write down an equation of a line that is parallel to L which passes through the origin. So first of all, the origin means that it's got to go through 0, 0. If it is parallel, that means that the gradient must be the same, because parallel lines never meet, so therefore the steepness of the line must be exactly the same. So gradient must be the same. The first thing I would do is look at this and identify this part here, the coefficient before the x, is going to tell us the gradient. So if the gradient here is 3, on the line that I'm going to write down, I know that the gradient must be 3, so I've got to stick with the same coefficient. And if it passes through the origin, that means I'm not going to add anything or subtract anything to this. I'm not going to put a constant there, because the constant tells me the y-intercept, which we've been told if it goes through the origin, we will not need to add or subtract anything on. Second part of this question asks us to find an equation of a straight line which passes through 0, 5 and is perpendicular to L. So we're still using the equation from the above, but perpendicular means meet at a right angle. Now you need to know that the gradient of these two lines, for them to be perpendicular, when they are multiplied together, they need to equal -1. So the formula for that is that m1 times m2 equals -1. If we know that the gradient of the first one was 3, we need to find the gradient of the second line. We can rearrange this by dividing by 3 on both sides, and we would get that the gradient of the second one is -1/3. Therefore I can put that in, so I know that y equals, and then my gradient would be here, which is -1/3 x. And then to work out my constant, I need to look at the other piece of information they've given me, and they've told me that it passes through 0, 5. That tells me the y-intercept, which is my constant, so therefore I know I need to add 5 onto my answer. Okay, the marks for this one, you would get 1 mark for having 3 in front of your x, so for having 3 as the coefficient, that would get you 1 mark. If you had add or subtract anything on here, that's fine, you'd still get this mark, but if you just had this as your answer, you'd also get your answer mark. On part B, you get 1 mark for knowing that the gradient would be minus 1/3, so 1 mark here, or I've shown it here first, so I'm going to put the mark there, and then your final mark is an answer mark for having the same answer that I have there. Question 16, we've got a thirds question and we're asked for it in its simplest form. Now, these are just 2 separate fractions, and when we multiply fractions, we multiply across the top, we multiply across the bottom, sorry. So, across the top, we're going to have, I'm just going to put these in a bracket so I can keep it all together, and I don't get confused. So I'm going to have root 5 plus 1, and I'm going to multiply that by root 5 minus 1. On the bottom, I've quite simply got 2 times 2. So I've got this, and I'm then going to simplify. Now to do that, I'm just going to get a different colour pen, and I'm going to show you the arrows that I put on. You may put them on the opposite side to me. That's absolutely fine. So I need to multiply the first thing in both, and that's root 5 times root 5. A third rule that you should know. Root 5 times root 5 is going to get me root 25 to begin with, and I'm going to see if I can simplify that afterwards. So I would end up with root 25 at this point. The next thing I'm going to do is multiply this one by the last thing, which is going to get me a minus, or a negative, root 5. Then I'm going to multiply the inside, and I'm going to get a positive root 5, and I'm going to multiply the last thing in each, which gets me a negative 1. Now underneath there, I've got 2 times 2, which is going to get me 4. At this point, I can identify that this is a negative root 5, and this one is a positive root 5. So I can cancel those ones out, because if I have one and I take one away, I'm going to get myself back to 0. Now root 25, I should be able to identify that that is actually the same as 5, and therefore I have 5 take away 1 on the top and 4 on the bottom. 5 take away 1 is 4, and 4 over 4 is the same as 1. Okay, so the marks for this one, the first thing you'd get a mark for is this line here, for understanding that that's how we expand the bracket and being able to identify they are the same thing. You'd then get a mark for understanding that root 25 would become 5 after simplifying, so you'd get 1 more mark here, and the final mark is an answer mark for getting the answer of 1. It's always nice when they come out with just a random number. Question number 17. Now this one ends on quite a nice question, one of my favourites, where it looks really scary, but actually you're just factorising the top and factorising the bottom, trying to find something in common that you can cancel. So if we've got x squared minus 3x, well, what is the common factor? That's quite simply just an x. So I'm only going to be able to factorise this linear. So I've got x times something would get me x squared. Well, I'd need another x there, and I'd need a negative 3 to be able to get that on the top when I expand. So looking at the bottom one, a little bit harder because we've got a coefficient here. So I'm going to have 2 brackets. So I'm going to have 2x in one of my brackets, and I'm going to have an x in the other. Now a little tip when you're doing these questions, generally speaking, you're trying to find the same bracket on the top or the bottom. This one is not going to be here because I've got a 2x, so it's probably going to be over here. But I'm just going to check by doing all my work in. I've got a negative 3 on the end of this, and I know that I need to be able to multiply these 2 numbers to get negative 3. So one of them needs to be a positive and one of them needs to be a negative. At the moment, I don't know which way around they're going to go. But I need to have a 3 and a 1 to be able to get a negative 3. And one of them is going to have to be negative and one of them is going to have to be positive. Well, if I know that's got to be the negative 3, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to work out how to actually cancel this down and simplify, which is what the question is asking, I can take a pretty good guess, even if I'm not sure, that that one is going to be the negative 3. Now you can multiply this out to check. The other way of doing it is once you've put these 2 in, you need to be thinking about this negative 5. How am I going to get a negative 5x? Well, the way that it is at the moment, if I do 2x times by the negative 3, I'm going to have negative 6. And then I'm going to have the 1x here, and that would get me my minus 5. If I had them the other way around, I wouldn't get that term in the middle, and therefore I would not be able to cancel properly. So I can then strike out these 2 because I can divide the top and the bottom by the bracket of x minus 3. And just to make sure that I'm making it very clear to the examiner, I know that the final answer is x, and then on the bottom I've got 2x plus 1. So the marks for this one are as follows. You get 1 mark just for being able to factorise the top correctly. You then get a second mark for being able to factorise the bottom correctly, and your third mark is for your answer for being able to cancel those out. These questions always look a lot scarier than they really are. If you can factorise, you want to be able to do this one in no problem.